Welcome to the Juggling the Chaos of Recovery podcast, where we focus on health and wellness and overcoming all types of addictions. You're in the right place if you're a mom, dad, sibling, or caregiver who has a loved one who is or was struggling with an eating disorder or any other kind of addiction. In a time where everything seems heavy, I'm here to bring you a very real, yet lighthearted take on what the heck we're all supposed to do with our lives while we care for our loved ones who are struggling. One thing holds true throughout it all. You can't juggle the chaos without smiling. At least a little bit. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Moira Gorski. I have gotten the opportunity to be interviewed on a number of other podcasts, and they're really, really valuable conversations. And today I wanted to bring one of those to you. I'm going to be bringing a few of those to you in the future. And because, again, I think I talk about a lot of these things on the podcast with my guests. But again, these conversations that I've had with others on their podcast, I just want to share with my audience here. So today you're going to hear a recording that I did with Lucy Forsting. We have done a few conversations, a few podcasts, and Lucy's a wonderful gal that I found, again, through networking through the internet. And she is a clinical psychologist by schooling, for 33 years. She does do some counseling, but she's been working for many years with this Synergy Connection show, just promoting wellness and connecting with other practitioners, if you will, like me or other health advocates that are kind of on a similar mission. Again, promoting different ways of thinking, mindset, wellness, and things like that. And so today on this podcast that you'll hear, we talked about the benefit of reset, like a reset, a detox, kind of a reset at the beginning of the year. And not just physically, but we do talk about that. But we just talk about kind of resetting our mind. And I did do, if you'd listen to it, I talked about start, stop, and continue. I do mention that on this podcast as well. But just different things that we can do to kind of reset, recalibrate, redo, regroup to move forward in a different light and things like that. So you'll hear that on the podcast. Now, Lucy does use some other wellness products, and she does talk about it at the beginning of her podcast. But when I talk about the wellness products, the 7-day cleanse and things like that, those, of course, are from Shaklee, which is the company that I've been partnered with for the last almost 22 years. You can find all kinds of information about that and the other podcast episodes and things like that on my recently redone website. So if you just go to moiragorski.com, you'll find that there's a link to, again, if you wanted to look at any of the Shaklee products that I mentioned in this, or wanted to pick up my journal, or just learn a little bit about me and what I do offer, I encourage you to go visit my website at moiragorski.com. But in the meantime, sit back and relax and enjoy this episode with Lucy Forsting and the benefit of resetting. And thanks again for listening.
It's time to experience the Synergy Connection Show with your host, Lucy Forsting.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Synergy Connection Show, where we do our best to connect the dots between who we are spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, and physically. And certainly all of 2020, all of 2021, and here we are still in 2022 talking about COVID and the importance of staying healthy. And, one of the things that's very clear to everyone now is the vaccine is not the answer. It can be a partial answer for those that have like comorbidities to other conditions such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease or obesity or something of that nature. Certainly, the vaccine is going to help keep you alive in all likelihood. You may not be hospitalized, or if you are, it'll be for a shorter stay. But even if you've had the vaccine, please consider two things. You need to know your vitamin D3 level. It needs to be above 70, and you have to ask for this test to be done. They don't do it otherwise, and there's all kinds of reasons, I think, why they don't. I won't go into those, but you do need to know that number. So again, above 70, it's a simple blood test. lab that they can run. The other one is the C-reactive protein test. That again is a lab test. You want that number to be below 1. I will tell you that my D3 is an 82 and my C-reactive protein is a 0.3. So you want to keep your inflammation level low. That's what C-reactive protein is all about, is looking at inflammation. And if your inflammation is low, you will probably not have much in the way of disease forming in your body. For those who get a number that's 4, 5, 6, because of, multiple factors, there are ways you can reduce that number. And I always send everybody over to my website, which is www.synergyconnectionradio.com. And there is a banner there that you can click on. There's a free health newsletter as well. But the banner is from Boomers Forever Young. I use their products. I have for 5 years. And I think that's a good portion of why I maintain such healthy levels of low inflammation and high D3. But if you go there and you look at their podcasts, they have a bunch of those on health. They have blogs, they have videos, they have wonderful testimonies. Maybe you'll see somebody that is doing a testimony with a similarity to a condition that you have. And go check out their products. If you decide you want to order something, if you just use my first name, Lucy, and put it in the discount code as you're checking out, they'll give you $5 off. And so, today everything counts, I think. Especially, I think I just heard that our cost of living, even as we're going into 2022, is at 14% across the board. And so that's just craziness. And down here in Florida, housing is up 40% because everybody wants to get out of the cold and move to Florida. And they're referring to it as the cost of living in paradise. And it has grown substantially. So come on down and visit, but you may decide that living down here is not for you. I've thought about going elsewhere myself. Okay, so I have as a returning guest today, Moya Gorski. She's a nurse. She's the founder of Gorski Wellness. She supports men and women on their life journey by looking at the mind and the body and the spirit. And she's from Wheaton, Illinois. So I think it's probably pretty chilly there today, is it?
It sure is. It's, yeah. When I drove to the health club this morning for my early morning boxing class, it was 9 degrees in the car. So, or well, not in the car, but
wow.
The car. Yeah. So it is bright and sunny, but sometimes those are the most deceiving days. It's right,
because you go out thinking that it should be nice, and boom, you're hit with frostbite.
That's right.
I remember living in Green Bay years ago now, but living in Green Bay, and we would get these stellar days that would be, crystal blue skies, and the pine trees were all sparkly green, and there would be snow on the ground. But you would think that, it's so nice to get out and walk around. But the wind chill could be, I remember the day we moved into the last house that we owned there, and the wind chill for our open house in December was 40 below zero. And we sat on top of kind of a hill that looked down on the Bay of Green Bay. And so it was whipping, coming up the hill. Wow. Because a lot of times your weather patterns went from west to east. And so that's the direction that we kind of faced. But 40 below zero, I didn't think anyone would show up. And they all came. So I was amazed. So we're going to be talking today about
housing too.
I'm sorry.
Just about the housing, I know that so many people have left Illinois, and even my girlfriend who's in real estate, she said she wants us to sell our house because we're all of a sudden empty nesters. She said, well, you should sell. And I'm like, you just want us to sell because you need a home to sell. I said, there isn't any place to go. And even when people are leaving the state, they're having a hard time finding places to live. It's crazy. So
I know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is either. I mean, like I mentioned, they talk about affordable housing here a lot because we have, not just snowbirds that have decided to come down permanently and sell their home, up north, but we have a lot of families, and we have, single moms, single dads, kids that want to be in fairly good school districts. and they can't find anything that they can afford, because the rule of thumb is your rent and or your mortgage should not be more than 33% of your take-home income. And the housing market has just so skyrocketed that people can't, do that anymore. So I really don't know even how they're getting bank loans, quite honestly. So it's crazy. It is crazy.
It is.
So we're going to talk about reset. And in a way, I suppose some of what we've been talking about has to do with that, because we need to reset our health and maybe reset our financial goals and reset, where we are in life. And so when you're working with somebody, because you do wellness yourself, how do you go about helping them look at their life and then making that decision of, I took a detour and now I need to get back on track maybe?
Yeah, we were talking before we came on here just about, the new year is a great time to take a look at things and kind of do some evaluation. And as much as I'm not a big fan of New Year's Eve, I do like the beginning of the year for this very reason, to take a look at where we've been. And this is what I do with many of my clients, is just say, okay, it is the new year. Let's take a look at, maybe what your goals were last year. Did you accomplish those? What happened last year? And health-wise, weight-wise, life-wise, and do a little bit of kind of evaluating. And then, but also try to, not just say, okay, I gained 30 pounds. Okay, well, okay, yes, but what else is happening? Tell me more about that. What else was going on in your life? Because I was speaking on a call last night with our team about a gal who did just that. She had gained quite a bit of weight for various reasons. And if you just say, okay, you need to lose weight, you don't really look at all of those other things that are going on. And there can be other things, like emotional things going on, or you lost your job, or your mother died, or, you had to move, or things like that impact then those habits that we're doing or not doing, every day to lead, that can lead to good health or poor health and things like that. So a lot of times I do this exercise myself, and I often can encourage my clients to do this, is to do something like start, stop, and continue. So take a look at, as we go into the new year, if you will, what worked for you. And so, this last year, so maybe what you'd like to continue on doing, be it a healthy habit, or your daily walks with your dog, or things like that. But what would you like to stop doing? Something that isn't good, and again, if we're talking about health and wellness and things like that, I'm going to stop, drinking wine at dinner. I'm going to stop eating after, I'm going to stop watching too much TV, or things like that. And then what am I going to start doing? And when I talk with a lot of clients, I like to talk about even just the idea of starting to eat more vegetables, or starting to drink more water, because those kind of things can really have an impact. And I just find that if somebody has these health goals that they're trying to accomplish, if we start out too big, it can be so overwhelming for them that they just don't even start at all. And so if we just say to somebody, well, what if you walked a little bit more every day? Or maybe you maybe you just started walking, or maybe drink more water, or try to see if you could have a vegetable every meal that you eat. Those can be little changes that can really lead to, as that consistency goes on, it can lead to bigger, that consistency, small steps leads to a bigger, return as time goes on.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think habits technically take 21 days to form, and you have to do it every day for 21 days And if you don't, you have to start over again because the habit isn't embedded sufficiently, to make that difference. But people who do start new habits, if they take baby steps, they quite often will stay with it. And if they are biting, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If they try to gobble the whole elephant, you're right, they're going to get discouraged and they're going to look at the scale, or they're going to look at, some part of their life that they would like to improve and give up. And so, the baby steps usually work, and consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, we found that, again, this gal that we interviewed last night, she started with something that we promote that's a 7-day cleanse. It's basically an eating unlimited fruits and vegetables for 7 days. And you do some targeted supplements that kind of detox and reset the insides. And so even though she admitted last night, she goes, I was kind of afraid to start that because I didn't want to say that I really didn't like vegetables. And I wasn't sure what I was going to eat for 7 days, but she embraced it. She followed the recipes that were recommended. And she found that as she got through that time, she lost like 13 pounds in the week. She said, I had the best night's sleep that I had ever, it feels like that I had ever had. And as time went on throughout, she had started working with us in September. And as time went on, she said, when the things came, like she went to a place in the fall, like to pick apples. And, I don't know about you, but I love those apple cider donuts, and she does too. And she just said, she would have normally just picked up bought the donuts and indulged in those. But she said, I reached for the apples. And she said it just kind of like, wow, my cravings are changing. My things that I want to put in, that I want to eat. I don't want that anymore. I want this. And that's what I've seen with working with clients over time. And there is some science behind it, but just as you eat more healthy and you take those things, the sugar out and things like that, you tend to not crave those things. And so as you're like in this particular program, you eat lots of vegetables and you're really alkalizing your system. And so you're not having those cravings. And so she found that over time, she just didn't crave those poor things in the box or the bag of cookies that she used to eat and things like that. And she was just then making healthier choices, which kept her continuing on. And yes, the scale was going down, but she was sleeping better. She felt better. She felt like she knew she had more energy. Mm-hmm. And what was really cool, and she got a little teary-eyed about it, she said, and I felt more confident. Like all of a sudden I was feeling like more confident about myself and more brave and things like that. And it was really very heartfelt what she said, I just felt better about myself, not just because I was losing weight, but just overall, I just felt, I showed up, so that's, again, that's a lot of times how I think it's a good way to step into the new year is just take a time to evaluate and then, again, look at it a little bit more. Cause I went through this myself as it was getting towards the end of the year. And I had some big goals for the year for my business. And I love to work for different incentives and things like that. And the company that I work with had some couple incentives that I was working for as that ended at the end of the year. So I was talking with my coach a couple of days before the end of the year. And she said, how things going and wrapping it up. And I was frustrated because I was looking at that. I wasn't going to get that trip that I was working for, and I might not even get that other incentive. And I said, if it was any other day of the year, even any other day of the month or another month, I would have said, I'm feeling great because things are going well. I've been able to help a lot of people, even though, I've been busy and it's been great. But I said, it's like 2 days before the end of the year. And I'm like really disappointed in myself. So she calmed me down a little bit and said, why don't you do this exercise that I have? Now, this is, again, more business related, but she said, it's an exercise that she has that we celebrate the year. and look at every month of the year and like the things that you accomplished those particular months and maybe the challenges that you had, but go through each month. And so when we got off our coaching call, I spent some time doing that. And I reflected on how a pretty amazing year I had that I was like, wow, I did. And there were some challenges in there. I mean, I had an amazing year in that I continued on with my podcast. As I've shared with you before, I started ballroom dance lessons. So I did a couple ballroom dance competitions and I did really well, like even better on the second one. I published a journal, but my mother died. And I had to have a biopsy myself, which was a little disconcerting, which turned out okay. I traveled, I had a child here, a couple of kids here that were struggling. So there was a lot of emotion around that. So I looked at that. It just was a great way for me to really evaluate and say, wait a minute, I had a pretty amazing year and maybe I didn't. And I learned that I wasn't as consistent with my business as I could have been, because consistency is what is able to get me to earn those trips.
Right.
No shame or judgment, but it was like, okay, perhaps I wasn't as consistent at the beginning of the year because my daughter was really struggling. And then my mother, she took a turn for worse in her health. And so the focus was there. And so it was okay, And so I shared with this on a team. And again, it really helped me just, again, to kind of pull back and look at the whole type of year. And I was like, wow, this is good. And I even shared that with some of the people that I coach within my business who have their own business. Like, step back and look at all of the things and don't be so focused on just the goals. I actually listened to a podcast this morning, a John Maxwell podcast that was about that. Do you have a growth mindset or a goal mindset? And sometimes when we're so focused on those goals, like if we don't accomplish the goals, we feel really bad, kind of like what was happening to me. But if we're focused on growth, that's kind of what I looked at when I looked at the year. I'm like, wow, I did grow. I did grow in my overall organization. We had a tremendous year and I grew in lots of other areas. And so that was good. But again, if we're so focused on those goals, and even this gal shared last night, she said, I was so focused on the fact that it was the end of the year. And by the end of the year, I wanted to lose this much weight. And she said, and I was 2 pounds short of that. And I got myself so discouraged. And yet she had lost 34 pounds already. So it's like that, okay, let's not just focus on the fact that, but let's look at that, how far you've come and how, it helped me. And I really, again, encourage people to take a look at that, because again, when you're looking at, okay, why didn't I accomplish those goals? Well, let's talk about what else was happening in your life. What else because then it can give you a different perspective and say, like with me, if I want to earn the trip that just was announced for this next year, I need to be more consistent in these areas. As I looked at, I'm like, okay, now I know if I really want to earn these trips and earn these incentives, I really figured out what was lacking. And we can do that same thing with our clients, to say, okay, let's look at that. Like, why did you fall off your healthy habits? What was going on? Okay. And then let's figure out how we can reestablish those. But I think the most important thing is to take the small steps, because it can be so overwhelming when we say, okay, we'll do this and join your health club. And then, cut the sugar out of your diet and make sure that it can be way too overwhelming. Right.
One of the things that I don't think there's any of us that don't have what we call comfort food. Mm-hmm. And so when people are stressed, one of the things that generally happens is, it's like you don't have a binky anymore. You don't have a baby bottle anymore. Hopefully you don't have an adult bottle you're going to. But you do kind of think about, what would make me feel better? And very often it's comfort food. So it might be macaroni and cheese loaded with calories, It might be, I don't know, a big bowl of spaghetti and meatballs, instead of a small portion or something. So there are things that we do that kind of go back to childhood, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and the things that mom used to make that just, are good memories. And then we associate feeling better with food. So the healthy food choices that you were talking about, with veggies, I doubt that there are many children that ever looked at a plate of vegetables and went, this is my comfort food. It just probably didn't happen. And as a result, we don't associate, fruits and vegetables that are healthy for us with feeling better. The parallel just isn't there between the two.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking when you were talking is on a cellular level, and as a nurse, this, that when we're growing up, they did the neatest study with children, and they were like 3 and 4 year old kids at a daycare center, and they were checking to see if they were left to their own device, what foods would they choose. And they observed this over about a month. So every day they would put different foods out. They would put fruits, and they'd put veggies, and they would put protein sources, and they'd have a couple of cookies, and but the kids did not gravitate when they're that young to the table with all of the carbs on it. They did gravitate to fruit and to vegetables and to protein, and they kind of balanced it out themselves, without anybody telling them, because they were listening to their bodies. Mm-hmm. As an adult, we don't listen to our bodies anymore. We kind of eat randomly, whatever's there, we'll eat. Or if we're at a restaurant, we're not necessarily thinking about what our cells need. And so the cells stop talking to us. They kind of go into like a quiet mode. But what they do is that if you're eating unhealthy, like a bag full of cookies, like you mentioned, that your friend was doing in the past, what the cells do is they notify you within a couple of hours, I'm still hungry. And then you go eat something else that's maybe not healthy. And a couple hours later, I'm still hungry. So our body is telling us that we're not feeding it nutritionally. And as soon as we start listening on a cellular level and feeding it the way it needs to be fed in order to stay healthy, your body will say, thank you. You don't need to feed me for 5 or 6 hours. I'm good.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the weight loss, is that because we're getting nutritionally fed instead of just fed, your body will signal that I don't need to be filled up again. You can wait a while. So it's really cool when we start listening to that. And the kids, when they did that study, that's what they realized, is that even at such a young age as 3 and 4 years old, they knew what their bodies needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is fascinating. And, that's what we find too. And what I encourage people when they do this cleanse, I think there's a couple of things there. Like when I was growing up, my mom, we always had vegetables, but, she boiled the beets and she boiled the Brussels sprouts or whatever. And they didn't necessarily taste the best, but like I've come to love roasted vegetables, and we roast cauliflower, and I roast beets, and I put some olive oil and a little bit of honey, and oh my gosh, they're so good. And, Brussels sprouts, and just, I think a lot of people, either they were raised in, their nose is turned up at the vegetables because they remember how badly they taste, and then they don't know how to prepare them, so that they do taste good. And so they just kind of push them aside. Or we used to talk in our, some of our groups with some of the new moms to say, just have a big salad at your meal times. And, maybe with your kids, okay, they have a little bit of lettuce, and then maybe they have a cucumber, maybe you start with some croutons, which necessarily isn't the best, but then they get kind of, oh, it's crunchy, and then I'll have some lettuce. Like you slowly start to introduce them to some, and then now or one of my girlfriends used to put one of those, like, I think it was a Tupperware thing that had all these spaces, and she'd fill it up with different cut up vegetables, the carrots and the celery and the peppers and the all radishes and all things like that, and said, okay, you have to take, and she has 5 kids. And so they'd all be there, like, while, that kind of bewitching hour while you're trying to get, when the kids are young and you're trying to get the food on the table and they're so hungry. So she'd put that down and she'd say, okay, you each have to pick 2 or 3, so there was a whole array, but they had to pick some and at least start with a couple of vegetables. And so that helped her. Helped the kids have satiate a little bit before the food instead of eating goldfish or whatever before. But it gave them an introduction to that. So I think that's one thing. But then it is kind of like, that's what I share all kinds of recipes with my clients and friends to say, okay, maybe, yeah, you don't have to like eat just raw carrots and celery, but you can make a carrot ginger soup, which is so good. And if you like carrots, it's like kind of a sweet soup, but it's so good. And then saute some onions and put it in there, or make a stir fry with, sweet potatoes and mushrooms and onions and peppers and things like that. Put some spices on there. You can have a really lovely dish that really does like warm you up. I think sometimes the comfort food, it's the warm stuff, right? Like you said, right. Spaghetti and meatballs and all of that, but having something warm, it can be very satisfying. So I think that that's something that I try to do a lot of, is to just share those recipes, because some people just, they don't know what to eat because they don't know how to prepare it. And so many of us are working from home now, or working from wherever. And it's easy for me to open that door and go to my cabinet and pick up the pretzels or whatever it is. But I also encourage my clients to, like, when you go to the store and you come home with those veggies or your fruit, like, take some time to prepare them. Mm-hmm. So pull out your glass containers, grapes, and then put them in containers. Because then when you open the fridge, then you can then you're seeing your carrots that you can grab, as opposed to your potato chips. And then you have those better choices in front of you. Right. Because I feel like that's, again, because we were all shut down, we were moving less because we couldn't go out of our houses. And sometimes we were eating more and not necessarily the right things because, we were grabbing the wrong things.
Yeah. I know that I discovered some kind of fun things, and this may be some of the recipes that you use too, but you can take green beans and fresh green beans or fresh asparagus or carrots or anything that's kind of crunchy like that, and put them in a Ziploc bag with a little bit of olive oil and sea salt and maybe some other seasonings that you like, and put them on a cookie sheet, like a little grill sheet, and grill them for a few minutes. And then at the very end, dust them with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And they are so yummy. And, like you said, the honey drizzled over things. There's a lot of different ways to prepare so that it is a healthy choice as opposed to a quick choice. And I do think a lot of people were used to eating on the run. And so, that's why fast foods became so popular, but so deadly, because, the obesity is one of the big factors for death in COVID, is that, we have so many people that are significantly overweight, and it's hard on every aspect of your body, not just, knees and shoulders and back and stuff like that, but every single aspect. So, I think. Well,
and I wanted to share another experience. I was coming home from, again, it's cold here in Chicago. So, and I often go and work out in the morning. And so when I was coming home another morning this week, and there's a Starbucks right by me. And a lot of times I'll go on my app and I'll order some, and I don't drink coffee much, but every once in a while I like to get treat myself to a little Starbucks. And I was like, okay, I'll order, and then I can drive through, and then I can just walk in and pick it up. And I was having a hard time with the app, and then they were sold out of something. And I was just like, and then I decided on something. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's going to be $5.50 for like this fancy coffee drink with like, I don't know, whatever it was, like a latte or cappuccino or something like that with oat milk. It's like, that is a lot of money. And I'm like, forget it. I'm not doing that. So I came home and I was like, but I also have a protein powder that I like that comes in a cafe latte. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make my own cafe latte thing. So I threw that in the blender, and my husband had some coffee made. So I threw a splash of coffee, and I put a half a frozen banana and some water. I mixed it up. I'm like, now that's a good drink. And I don't know how much it costs, but I mean, it's usually, it's probably probably $2.50 or something for that. And it certainly was a lot healthier because it had the protein in it and a little banana and all that. I was like, that's what I need to talk about more often, is like, we can drive through and like, because people will say, oh, I can't afford to eat healthy. Well, if we're going to Starbucks and spending $5.50 on a cappuccino, and a egg sandwich or whatever, how much that is, if we shifted that spending and did something, even if we bought our own coffee, and that's what my husband does, he buys Starbucks coffee and then he grinds it and he makes it himself. He says, I'm not going to go and spend $3 for a cup of black coffee or whatever it is. Like, if we shift our spending, look at where we're spending and shift it to perhaps, what can I do to prepare that at home? Then all of a sudden we find the money that we need to pay for those healthier. And one of my friends said, you either pay for wellness now or illness later, or something like that, so
Right.
Pay for it now. And then otherwise it'll be much later and you may be dealing with some illnesses.
Well, and the reality, I think, is that once you go down the illness path, it's very, very hard to come all the way back again. A lot of people that have, developed COVID, whether it was the original or the Delta or now the Omicron, but, they will never be quite back to where they were prior to getting the disease. I mean, there are these long hauler symptoms, and even those that have been vaccinated are finding that they have some of the symptoms lingering, long after they are coming out of, getting it.
Right. Well, and even outside of that, because I completely agree with that. I've seen that happen with people that I know. But even as I saw with my parents, as they're, like I said, my mom passed at the beginning of this year and she was 85. My dad's 87, I believe, maybe just turned 88. But just to they're pretty set in their habits. And, they kind of eat okay, healthy wise, but not, I learned my sweet tooth from my parents and things like that. And so to just get them to change things. And even as my mom, as they discovered that she had Parkinson's, I started to look into better foods to eat for Parkinson's and different. And it was really, she wasn't really open to making the changes. And even to have my dad, you guys should have some protein shakes. Again, it's not about weight loss. They needed to actually have more protein and try to gain a little weight because they were losing weight. And the elderly population tends to, lose weight, and they lose their muscle mass because they're not moving as much and they can't process their protein as well as the younger. And so, but it's hard when they're 80 years old to have them reset their habits.
Exactly.
It's hard, even, food wise, as well as, activity wise. My parents were always active, but they never went to the gym or even just went on a daily walk. And, I do commend my dad after my mom passed, after I talked to him after a month or so. I mean, we talked to him, of course, earlier than that, but, I'm like, how's it going? He says, yeah. And he told me that he was joining the walking club. They live in a senior living community, which is pretty big. And so they have a walking club when it's warm out, and they walk the property. And so he started to meet them, a couple of times a week to walk. And I think that's good. I'm like, good for you, Dad. Cause that wasn't something that he was in the habit of doing. He tried to do that with my mom, but she could only last so long.
And so he just
her
didn't.
Parkinson's.
Yeah.
So he didn't. He tried to, but then my mom, she's like, oh yeah, but she would only make it this far. Then we'd have to sit. And so I was glad that when she was passed and he was feeling better, he's like, yeah, I went out and I was walking. And then he said one time, he goes, well, sometimes I don't make it to the group, but then I'll just walk myself. I'm like, good for you, Dad. I mean, it's a matter of just staying active and keeping moving. And again, the point is that it's hard. It's good to try to, that's why I said with the kids and salads and vegetables, if we can introduce people at an earlier age to just some ways that they can eat healthier and develop those healthier habits,
right?
Then,
they don't have as many bad habits to break.
Right. I know that all my kids love vegetables, and they love salads, and it's just been what we eat in our family. And even these, I mean, I love cauliflower and broccoli, but I started to roast it a lot this year, and man, it is just like a staple. I mean, cauliflower is not cheap, so I'm like, maybe we won't do cauliflower this week. For some reason, it's kind of expensive, but we love it. Just chop it up and put a little olive oil, and then there's all kinds of fun seasoning mixes that we have, and sprinkle that and roast them. Oh, so good.
So what is your favorite like crunchy thing that you put on cauliflower or broccoli?
Well, I don't know the brand, but there was a herb, spice mix that was for roasted vegetables that I found at a Tuesday mornings. And it's, I think it has a little paprika in it, garlic, onion.
So is it in like an envelope or is it in a bottle?
No, it's in a glass bottle.
Glass bottle. Oh, okay.
Yeah, glass bottle. But then there was, I think we used like a green goddess spice mix last night when we had cauliflower. And my daughter reminded me, she says, oh, this reminds me of that spice mix you used to use from the Spice House. And I know that you can get like the Spice House. There's a few locations here in Illinois, but you can also go online. And there was a Paris mix and a Lakeshore Drive mix. I think the Spice House was developed here in Illinois. So, there's Lakeshore Drive and they were, again, more green herbs and things like that. I'm not sure what it was in it, basil or parsley or things like that. But again, we just found what we liked. And right. I think that's what I encourage people, like, just try, because people they want to salt their food. Well, just try just some kind of spices. You don't have to necessarily put salt on it, but what if you picked up these spice mixes and with a little olive oil, you can really put some nice flavor into your vegetables.
Absolutely. The other thing that I think is super cool, if you are in an area where you can have a garden with kids and let them plant a few things, watch it grow, be able to harvest, because then they are much more interested in eating it if they've participated in it somehow. And they can take it all the way, to cooking it or baking it or something like that, because then they kind of own it. It's theirs. And I think they become a lot more interested in food and healthy food in particular. But, how do you make things? If they think that the only place to get food is McDonald's, or Burger King or someplace like that, then they have a very limited repertoire, because they don't know, like you said, they have no idea how to prepare anything. So, that's pretty cool is to get them somehow involved. And even container gardening for people who live in apartments or condos where they don't have access to growing something in the actual soil. There's so many container gardens, today that you can do at least your salad. You might not be able to grow ears of corn, but you could do a lot of other things.
Oh yeah. And big, just a big pot with, putting some trellises there so that you can, grow peppers or, we've even done that. We've have a place that we'll plant a garden, but sometimes I'll do my herbs in those, big pots instead of, so that I can have the basil and the rosemary and things like that in a little pot. And you can do that even if you live in an apartment or a, condo or something like that. And I don't know about you, but like in the next town over, they have garden plots that you can rent, or I don't know how exactly that works, but you can see in the summertime that people go over and then they have their garden plot. It's because they don't have it wherever they live, but they can go and plant. And
there's a lot of communities that do that right around here. So if you lived like in Safety Harbor, they have a whole area for people who would like to rent, a little patch of land to grow a few things in. And as long as you're not too far away, because you can't rely on somebody else to weed your garden or to water it or, take care of it. But I think that's a great idea. And most of the people, down here, you have what's called a lanai. It's not like when I was growing up, we had a big front porch, but here it's usually, it's a kind of a screened in area. And then it's a matter of looking and seeing, where is the sun going to come in to your area? But most lanais are pretty good size. So you could have, a garden technically, inside of that, as long as your cat or dog wouldn't be digging around in it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think another thing, just because this is something that I experienced recently, just with healthy eating and things like that. We, again, became empty nesters and in December, and I love to cook, but I get kind of bored with and how am I going to cook for two and things like that. And so there's different meal prep services that you can get a couple of meals delivered to you. Not that you can get them and then you make them, this one's called Green Chef, which I think is part of HelloFresh too. There's a couple. And so we get a couple of meals delivered every week. We started doing that to just get some different ideas, and they give you the recipe cards. And so a couple of them we've really liked. And so we keep the recipe card because then we can make it again. Right. And so and we did that many, years ago when we had all the kids here and we're really busy. And that's how I think some of my kids learned how to cook, because it was like, hey, okay, I started this, but can you finish it? And, it takes you less than 30 minutes to prepare the meal. So I'm like, okay, I got to take this kid to hockey. Can you finish this? I mean, I've done that with a couple of my kids, and they were easy enough that they could finish up the meal, if you will. But that's a great way, again, not only to introduce the kids, but if you're feeling like you don't know how to cook, get one of those services. And so, because they're fairly simple and to follow along, and they're really pretty healthy meals, and you can get that confidence, wow, maybe I can cook a healthy, stir fry shrimp pesto with blah, blah, side of linguine or whatever, and it's not that difficult. I also have a girlfriend that owns a place here where you can go and pick up, same type of thing. You can pick up the meals and then prepare them at home and get them on the table within 30 minutes. So there are options if people don't really know, again, how to cook or what to do and things like that. And
right.
They can learn.
Like any skill. If you want to, change where you're currently living, with your health and your emotions and everything else, if you like where you are, then, continue doing it exactly the same way you've been doing it. If you're recognizing that there are some things that maybe need to be changed a little bit. I know we talked at the beginning of the show about it's like cleaning your closet, but, looking into your life and seeing what areas maybe you would like to improve, and then going from there. And health and wellness is certainly a huge one, because if you are eating better, you will have more energy. You will lose weight that isn't your friend in terms of your health. And you may learn some wonderful cooking skills along the way. So, those are all fun things. And if you can do it with a couple of friends, you can support each other.
Yeah, we had that a couple of times that, a couple of women got together and we made some, freezer meals, if you will, together, and we were able to share them and, I brought my favorite recipes, she brought hers, and then we were able to prepare some meals and put them in the freezer and have fun together. And we talked about even just cleaning out, cleaning things out. I know that we live in a world of excess. So just, be it that your office or your closet, or I know that's, again, I talk with some clients who they're like, yeah, I need to lose a few pounds, or my girlfriend, she texted me one day, she said, can you just come over? She said, I went through my closet and I decided I'm not going to fit into these particular clothes anymore. I have been holding on to them, thinking I'm going to lose the weight, and I'm just not going to. And I think you might fit into some of them. So come and take the bags. And she said, I want them out of the house. And so that was kind of a nice for me, because she had some lovely clothes and some of them fit me, but then it gave me the opportunity to go through mine. I was like, okay, I haven't worn this sweater in a long time. And I don't know, with this, I used to do so much more out, networking out there with the nice pants and the blazers and stuff. I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm going to wear that again. So it gave me a chance to go through my closet, and, I probably gave away 4 bags of clothes from there. I picked up 3 from her, gave away 4, and got an update on my wardrobe. But I think we all need to do that too, is just kind of go into our closets and say, you know what am I holding on for this for?
Exactly.
And, people have different ways that they organize their closet and know what they've worn and they won't want, worn. They use different hangers. Okay. If you haven't, I don't know. I don't do that myself, but I know that some people do that they put their clothes on a certain color hanger. When they put them back in, if the ones that aren't this certain color at the end of the year, those are the ones they haven't worn. And so it's time to get rid of them.
Oh,
but,
okay.
There's certain things like that, but I think, we do live in a world of excess.
Right.
And so just doing, that maybe that once a year, a couple of times a year, kind of cleaning through and reevaluating, but also, like we said earlier, like metaphorically, like what are we holding on to? Like, what are we holding on to that we could really get rid of or say goodbye to, be it a fear, a limiting belief, and things like that. And what's there that you want to keep. And then what do you want to continue, with, and things like that. So I think it's good to clean things out at the beginning of the year. Again, energetically, it's great to just, I could go through this, my office here and give away some books and clean up some papers and things like that. And energetically, it just feels better. And then they say that, as you get rid of things and clear it out, then it gives room for more goodness to come in.
And I truly do believe that. I'm in the process of slowly getting myself ready to move in April. And so looking at things that I had things in storage from when we moved here from Wisconsin, and they were in the original moving boxes. So I had packed them 20 years ago and started going through them and realizing, some of them I do need to donate, some I wanted to share with family, and some I will take with me. I had a friend who had a theory that if you haven't worn it or used it in a year, donate it, and she never bought anything clothing wise unless she gave one thing away.
Yep.
Whether it was to a thrift store or something else, but she would not buy something unless she was, giving something away. And I always thought that was such a great, way to look at life, because you're going to have stuff. You just do. Mm-hmm. But we are a nation of hoarders in many, many respects. And, guys like to hang on to the screws and the nuts and the bolts, and they have all kinds of pliers and hammers, and because you never know when you might need it, right? And women do exactly the same thing. We don't have maybe the garage stuff that the guys do, but we have things that we cook with, and things that dishes and containers and things that we might need. It's time to lessen up the things that I'm going to be moving because it'll make it much easier for everybody if I can do that. Right. So to pull this one to a close, resetting is kind of across the board, resetting, looking around our environment and saying, what things do I maybe need to donate? What things can I simplify? Looking internally at our lives with beliefs and habits, patterns that maybe are not serving us very well anymore. What other things would you say are really important, as you look at a reset that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think, what popped into my head is just sometimes evaluate your friends. I mean, it may sound a little, but there's sometimes the people that we hang out with, I mean, we want the people that we hang out to be, to be life-giving to us, to be positive and things like that. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, I think sometimes it's time to say goodbye to those friends, which again can sometimes sound not so good, but really, if they're not serving you, again, if they're not supportive of you, perhaps it's time to move on. And again, those can be difficult things to breakups to happen and things like that. But I think that's part of the things that you can take a look at too, is who are you spending your time with?
Right.
Who are you giving your energy to? And I also remember I talked to a mom one time, and she just, she's a busy mom, 2 girls, busy business and things like that. And she just had kind of a lack of, she felt like she wasn't doing enough. And I think she just had some kind of lack of fulfillment. And I encouraged her to look into like volunteering. Like, who else can, like, when you can, I don't know. I think that's one thing that I talked about in something that I was going to start this new year. Because I used to volunteer at a horse farm, and I used to volunteer at the local animal shelter. And then with COVID, it changed their policies, and I really haven't gone back. But there's a cat shelter that my son and his girlfriend used to go to. And so I'm thinking about, I'm doing the process of doing the orientation, things like that, because it feels good to be able to go and help other people, animals, be it you can volunteer at your hospital or volunteer at the library or things like that, or your local senior living place or something like that. I think that's sometimes when we're looking at putting things in, if we're going to put something in our life, putting something like that in our life, that, or perhaps getting rid of the negative and putting something positive where you can go and make a difference in somebody's life,
Right.
make a difference in that cat's life or the horse's life or things like that,
Right.
which may seem a little, but they need to be socialized, and you can make a difference when you go and socialize cats and clean the horses and things like that.
Absolutely.
I think those are things to sometimes that we, again, in the busyness of life, we forget about.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're kind of looking at our habits, our health habits, what we eat,
who we associate with,
who we associate with, and also looking at, what we're watching, what we're listening to. Those are all things that we can do a reset on.
Yes.
If it's, turn the news off and
go for a walk.
Go for a walk, turn the news off and play a card game with your kids or something like that. That
exactly.
can be
read a book.
Read a book. Yeah.
Right. Oh, Moya, we have such fun together. So
we do.
Thank you for being on the show. Let people know how they can find you. It will also be on the synopsis, on the platforms. And so, there's a contact area there as well. But for those listening, how can they get hold of you?
I think the easiest way is you can find me through my website, which is now MoiraGorski.com. So MoiraGorski.com. You can find me and how I support people in their health. You can find a link to my podcast there. You can find a link to my journal. And you can also find me on all the other social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Those are the ones that I'm very active on. Again, I love to make connections. I love that we made this connection the last, couple of years, year and a half.
Yeah.
And just connecting with others to see how I can support them in their life, because life is worth living, and we all deserve, a happy, healthy life. And but I realize, and I think you and I share that same understanding, that sometimes we just need a little help, from someone else.
I think that's true. It's kind of like a hug, a hug over the internet.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I know you're going to be back with me towards the end of May. And until then, have a warm winter and a beautiful spring.
Yes. And good luck with your move and getting through your things. And I look forward to connecting with you again and having you on my podcast pretty soon again too. So thanks again for the time, Lucy.
Oh, you are so welcome. Take care of yourself.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Share it with others, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I've got a tribe over on Facebook, so head over there and search for Juggling the Chaos of Recovery Podcast Tribe. And do you know somebody who has a story to share, a story of recovery and hope? Please let me know, as I'd love to feature them as a guest on one of these next upcoming podcasts. And perhaps you're looking for a community of like-minded, collaborative, and supportive people who cheer each other on as we strive to improve our lives. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, schedule some time with me. You'll find the links in the show notes. Let's talk, and let me help you find your way. And I'm here to tell you that you're worth it.